Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast. This is by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob. He's Joe. And we thank you for taking the time to join us today. Joe, how goes it? Is college football still satisfying you, even with all
It's
of the issues and fun things?
it definitely is still satisfying me. It's a frustrating game. I'm glad it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun for the next several months to play. Years, so depending on when they come up with the next game and see everything. But it's nice to have that outlet. It is almost football season because the red season is officially done. I would say. I mean, there's always the slight hope that they can go on a magical run here, but they put the nail in their own coffin. It feels like.
Yeah, I would say David Bell may specifically have done it this weekend, but we will talk about that here shortly. Our question of the day for those of you who are listening or watching: who do you hope the Reds will trade by Tuesday? That is right. We're at the point now where it's not a question. This is going to happen. The Reds are, I think, too far out of it at this point. I think Joe's been agreeing with that for a while. But for those of you who are wondering, the Reds are 5 games under. They are 5 games out of the wild card, 10 games out of the um, division. Excuse me. And despite their run differential, they may go down as one of the best run differential teams to finish in last place in their division that I can really remember. So that is something interesting to note. They had an opportunity this weekend. We will go through that here now, I guess. So after an 0-3 sweep by the Nationals, Joe, the Reds were able to start off their week well. A 4-1 win over the Braves. Ronaldo Lopez, who's been one of the best pitchers in baseball in terms of his ERA and everything else. We lit him up, you could say. The Reds were able to get to him. Benson with a home run off of him. Ellie with a big triple. Candy with a big double. Fairchild with a big double. The Reds would go on to win 4-1 behind Hunter Green, who had an outstanding outing. Comes off the All-Star game after giving up a 2-run bomb to have them lose the game. I say he pitched pissed off. Only gave up 2 hits, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts in 7 innings to lower his ERA to a 3.14. He got the win. Cruz with a hold, and Diaz did give up an earned run. Things got a little interesting in that game for some reason, but ultimately did not matter. Then, Joe, we had a rain out on Tuesday. The Reds had a doubleheader scheduled for Wednesday. The second game, the night game, would be rained out, but their afternoon game, the Reds would go on to win 9-4. Frankie Montas looked awful, and he did not get any help from his defense to give him, some fairness here. Will Benson, Ellie with a big error in this game, but only 4.1 innings pitched, 10 hits, 4 runs given up, 6 strikeouts. But the Reds were also able to get to Winans in a very big way. Ellie and Steer, each with 3 hits, big hits. Fraley with his second home run of the year. Ellie with a monster 420 shot to raise his average. The Reds would go on. Fraley would also have 3 hits to give him his due. Noelvi Marte would have a huge double in this game as well for the Reds, and they would go on to technically sweep that series 2-0. And you head into the Friday game against the Rays, and the Reds would win this one as well in extras, something they have not done. They won a one-run ball game, Joe, and they sat only 3 games under 500 at this point, 3-2. Candelario with a huge double to start this game off. And then the Reds were relatively held in check until Stu Fairchild doing what he does and came up huge for the Reds to hit a double in the 10th inning. Lodolo pitched very well. We had some worries, but 6 2/3 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. He did not have his curveball on Friday at all, and he still pitched extremely well, almost going 7 innings. I couldn't believe it when I looked up and saw it. They also got 2 big 8th and 9th innings out of Nick Martinez. and the Reds were able to beat Shane Baz in the Rays. The next day, they would go on to muster only 4 hits, one from Steer Friedel, who had just returned, Noelvi Marte, and Will Benson. They'd lose 4-0. Andrew Abbott would get chased out on Saturday after 2 solo home runs. Only 4 innings pitched, 8 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. Raises his ERA to a 3.38. Tony Santillan would come in and do well, and that would be about it. You head into the Sunday game. The Reds go up 1-0 early. They're holding on to a 1-run lead the entire game. Elly with 3 hits this game as well. Hunter Green was masterful, Joe. Masterful. Another game with 7 innings pitched. 2 hits, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. Lowers his ERA to a 2.97. But Fernando Cruz, as you always talk about, comes in with an empty inning and would give up 2 runs. Lucas Sims with the hit that would ultimately not get the job done, unfortunately. Fernando Cruz's ERA is now a 4.81, and the Reds would go back to 5 games under, picking up only 1 game this week, Joe. Despite a great start to the week, they started off 3-0, and losing the last 2 games in games that felt very winnable. I do declare, Joe, that it is time to announce that it is over. Done. The Reds are done. I have jumped on that train with you. You've been saying it for the last 2 weeks. I had some hope after the Braves series. I thought if they go and they win 2 of 3 here, they're still in a pretty good spot against the Rays. They had the opportunity truly to sweep. I know there was a 4-0 game, but they just could not muster any offense in that game. But Joe, where are you at here? Are you still like 100% off the train? I know they're only 5 games out. I will give them that. But it just feels like they can't get past being 2 or 3 games under 500.
Yeah, I'm still out. It's just something we haven't seen the consistency you want to see. We haven't seen those long winning streaks, or we've only seen 1 long winning streak this whole year, and that's really bumped up their ability to still be somewhat in the race right now somehow. And then also the bad National League. You mentioned we're 5 games under 500. We're 5 games. The problem with saying like, hey, we could still do this is not only like we're 5 games back. We need other teams to lose to jump them, and we have so many teams other than us who need to lose. So like, yeah, we could maybe jump the Cubs and the Giants and be sitting there still 4 spots out of the wild card spot, but we're only ahead of the Nationals, Marlins, and Rockies, who stink. So, yeah, is it still possible? Yes, if you want to look at run differential, Pythagorean wins, you can do that and say, hey, it'll average out. We'll end up making the playoffs. Just don't think we've seen the consistency, and I think this week was kind of a microcosm of the whole season. We had a game where we beat a team that was very good in the Braves, even though they were banged up. We scored 9 runs in one of those games. And then the rest of the week, we scored 4 against the Braves once. We scored 3 to get a win against the Rays. We scored 0 against the Rays, and we scored 1 against the Rays. That's just what we do. We score 9 runs one day of the week, and then we score 1 or 0 next couple games. So to me, it's one of those things where this is kind of a fitting end to the season. You kind of have to make your decisions now because trade deadline is tomorrow as we sit here on Monday. And, that's part of the reason why it's over. If it was, hey, trade deadline was next month, maybe they still get some time to keep the things going. But you have to make your decisions up now. And with the way things look, with the team the way they are playing, it is probably time to sell, and because it is a seller's market, it is probably the smart thing to do to sell as well, because a lot of these trades that have already happened, Rob, teams are getting a very big return.
Yeah, if I'm the Reds, I would absolutely be looking at trading. It is disappointing, I will say, especially because Elly is finding himself right now, Joe. This dude is bumped that average all the way up to 263. I think this month specifically, I was looking, in the last 30 games, Joe, he has 39 hits and 121 at-bats, 6 home runs, 14 RBIs, 13 walks, 41 strikeouts, 18 stolen bases, and is batting .322. His OPS right now is right above 1,000. It's like 1,005 right now over the last month. He is batting .370 over the last 7 games. He is finding it, and he's he's seeing pitches well in my mind, Joe. Like, I'm watching him and I'm like, wow, he's paying attention. Like, he's not striking out as much. Like, his strikeout numbers will be inflated this year, but I'm going to tell you, I think there's a very real chance that this may be the last year that we see him even hovering around that 160, 70 strikeout mark. Like, he is starting to really, I think, realize his potential right now. His OPS is an 842. When you look at what it was looking like earlier on in this year, Joe, he was batting 208 in May. June, he started to bump it up again. And then just this, since July has started, he's batted 308 this month. Absolutely insane. This kid is a star, and I wanted to again talk about his rise. We are seeing this kid figure it out, guys. Just like he did in AAA, just like he did in AA. It just takes longer when you're in the MLB. I would not be surprised. Joe and I were talking about it this weekend. I would not be surprised to see Elly De La Cruz hit 30 home runs this year and steal, we'll say, 80 bases, which would be absolutely insane as a 22-year-old in his second season. The Reds need to extend him right now. This is not a topic that we were really going to talk about, but I at least wanted to bring it up real quickly, Joe, because I think it is absolutely worth discussing.
Yeah, I think it's good to see the average go up. I know not everyone cares about the average as much, but for a young player who's trying to be more consistent, I care about the average. I wanted him at a minimum to have a 250 average this year when things were really bad. Now that he's up here over 263, I thought maybe 275 was a good average he could have this year, and he looks like he might be able to hit it. Even anywhere somewhere in between that range, I think is good. I still think he's always going to be a high strikeout player. That's just who he is, and that's fine. Hard to change exactly who you are. You can get better at what you are, but hard to change exactly what you are as a player in the professionals after already having so many years in the minors. I am excited, Rob, because 55 steals on the season. The record for the Reds in the season is 60, which I believe Eric Davis has. So that'll be fun to see. And then it's just good because the Reds have had so many good speedsters over the years. They have Billy Hamilton. They have Eric Davis. They have Joe Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very good history of fast players, and I'm excited to see him break that record here in this next month or so. I'm excited to see him become a star. I think if you take everything else out of the equation, that this year was not what we expected. It was a bad year. The good news is we found out Elly can develop a little bit more than maybe we thought at the start of the year when he was hitting down in the 230s, 220s. That wasn't the greatest, but now you kind of know what you have to work with, and then we can maybe build around him for next year. It's unfortunate that some of the other pieces didn't step up this year, but you have to be happy with how Elly has played overall this year after that slow start.
Yeah, and there will be other people who will step up. I think Steer kind of just got muddled. He's really kept his average very consistent. Like, he went on a horrible streak there in May, but it's kind of, fluttered around, the 230 to 250 mark through the rest of the season. I think he's more of a 260, 270 type hitter long term, to be honest with you. He's still figuring it out as well, but and even if he ends up being just a 250 hitter, Joe, with a guy who I think will eventually be a 25, 30 home run guy, the one thing that he does do, I saw, Joe, is he's one of the best hitters in baseball, like in terms of his average and everything increasing when there are runners in scoring position. And we're seeing that. I mean, he's going to probably get close to 90 RBIs this year. I would say 80, somewhere between 80 and 90, depending on the kind of run they go on here in these last 2 months. But there are encouraging signs for certain players, and that's all to say that we are approaching the trade deadline, Joe, and the Reds made a couple of interesting moves here over the last few days, just in terms of they sent Rhys Hines down once TJ Friedl came back. People were pissed, and I'm going to get my side, and I'm going to just say this. I understand why people are upset. I think Rhys Hines is a young player, though, and was going to get exposed, and I don't know that he was necessarily going to keep at the pace that he was going at. His average had lowered like 150 points in a week. So, I'm not going to sit here and say that, sure, like, he would have 100% been better than Will Benson because I think that's who was going to go down. But I think they at least know that Will Benson's going to get a hit 1 out of every 5 at-bats right now, which is what he's doing. He's still hitting for power. He's still playing okay defense for the most part. He only committed his second error of the year this past weekend. It was not a good one, but, still. And he is the players love him. So I think they were trying to hope that he would keep the chemistry going over this last, couple days here. We'll have to see what happens after the trade deadline, Joe, because I think the Reds will have a lot of very serious moves that they need to consider over the next 2 days, including calling up young guys, letting them get their opportunities, getting their at-bats, because I think we know what Will Benson sadly is right now, but I understand why they did it because you just ran out of room, and if anybody, and I mean anybody, was calling for Stu Fairchild to go down instead because they needed the right-handed bat or whatever, I will personally give you an over-the-internet smack. Well, Stu Fairchild is doing his job and has consistently been a clutch player for this Reds team. That I know Rhys Hines had one big week, but Stu's been doing it all year. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with that one. I'll let you go. I'm sure you may disagree with me on the Stu Fairchild one, but that's where I'm at.
I know. No, I should Stu Fairchild be playing as much as he has? No, if you want to win. But has he done better than expected? Yes. And I think that deserves to be said. I think he is a guy who can bat against lefties for a team. I think he should be coming off the bench, and if the lefty starter's going against you, he can start, which means he's not playing 77 games like he has this year. Probably means he's playing more like 40 at this point, 50 maybe. Mm-hmm. That's really his role. But again, it's one of those players we talked about, Rob, who's being asked to do more than they should be doing this year because other players aren't performing.
Yep.
And I'm not going to penalize him for that. He has one WAR. He's doing fine. I do think they should have sent Will Benson down. This is a travesty that they are letting this guy continue to hit. He has options, and they're not using him. It's crazy to me. He below 200 batting average at this point is awful. They keep on playing him. He's played 95 games played. At this rate, I would say the locker room chemistry means little to me, especially because we are going into the trade deadline and now we're going to be, probably dealing some people away. That's going to ruin the chemistry anyway. I would rather have found. I think we're starting to find out what Will Benson is. I would rather have tried to find out in these next 2 months if Rhys Hines can be anything for the team next year, whether it can be a bench player, whether he can be a starter, a star. Give him 2 months of at-bats. We can actually see what he's doing, even though I expect him to not be good either, Rob, if we're being honest. I expect him to kind of revert to the mean a little bit from what he was doing in the minor leagues. But we have enough data points on Will Benson now to say probably never going to be a guy who contributes for the Reds in a major way again. He could be a Stu Fairchild role where he's off the bench. That's fine. But if he's your starting outfielder, you're in trouble. I want to find out what we have in Rhys Hines after you brought him up. If you don't bring him up in the first place, fine. That is what it is. But since we brought him up, let's see if he can keep this streak going. I know he's kind of faltered a little bit. He's still batting .316, which is crazy to me. Let's see what we've got. Let's see if we need to. Hey, this offseason, is Rhys Hines going to be a guy who can contribute? Do we need to sign a platoon outfielder? Do we need to sign a starting outfielder? I think this team came in with a lot more answers than questions, and now we're at a point where we have more questions than answers of what do we have for next year? What do we need for next year? And a lot of these will be answered by the trade deadline, don't get me wrong, but I would love to have what Rhys Hines is more set up for us, because as we've seen, we got to see a little bit of Ellie last year. We got to see a little bit of Matt McLain. It wasn't a full season, right? But that's helped Ellie this year, too. He's hitting .263. I don't think if he had come up later last year, I don't know if that would have been the same. If he came up just this year, if that would have been the same. Matt McLain, we got to see what he can do a little bit as well. He got to be more comfortable with things. I just don't think setting Rhys Hines down does him any services. While I do think with Benson, maybe it does help him out, because I do think he put a lot more pressure on himself than was necessary this year, as we can see by the strikeout numbers and just the poor play. Send him down, give him a mental reset. I think that can help some guys sometimes. A lot of times you can say, it might steal their confidence, but at the same time, I don't know what else to do at this point. We're at the end of July. We're heading into August, and he's still batting under 200. He's still not playing well. I don't know what else you can do. So that's what I would have done. Again, it's not a big issue because both those guys you're not expecting a whole lot out of, but I would have loved to see what we got out of Rhys Hines the rest of the year.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm totally on that boat. I just meant for this last couple days. I think that they should end up sending him down now that they are out. I think that they wanted to try one more time over the weekend and see what happens with Friedel back, because I think the Reds, Joe, we have a problem right now where we have two of our three starting outfielders and we have both our bench spots. We have our fourth and fifth outfielders, right? Like that's what you generally want. And the thing is, people are like, well, normally you only carry four outfielders. Well, Spencer Steer can go to the infield if you need him to. So, in all reality, like you have Steer and you have Friedel. That is who you have. I don't want to hear anything about Friedel either. This guy's been injured all season. He's going to find it. He will have the opportunity over the next 2 months to find it again, and I think he will be totally fine, if you ask me. I think Fraley is an awesome platoon or off the bench, lefty. I think that obviously Stu Fairchild is the same way in my mind as well. I think you have four of your five outfielders, but you need that starting one. And if Rhys Hines can be that, if you don't have to go out and trade for that, absolutely give him that opportunity, right? But he's got to show the ability. Like you look at his heat graph, anything that is outside, he's not hitting right now. Like he just won't. So like I want to see him work on that. And he's still young enough to where if that dude can figure out how to either lay off the slider or the breaking ball, whatever you want to use, away, he could be a very good hitter. But he almost reminds me a little bit of an Edwin Encarnacion, which, yeah, he did end up turning into a great player, but I'm talking about young Edwin Encarnacion in the free swinging ways, the full. He reminds me of that more than an Aquino personally, just in the way that he swings and the way that he plays. So I will say that I think they should give him the majority of the at-bats. We saw Will Benson last year did get sent down, and that helped him immensely because he did have the pressure taken off of him. But you can only do that so many times, especially when the guy is in his mid to upper 20s, and you're looking to have a team, especially for next year, that can compete. Because we'll get to it here, but we're going to talk about when this Reds rebuild is going to end, Joe. And it's sad. It's sad because I think Will Benson is a great glue guy. I think he loves everybody on the team. I've heard nothing but that he is just an awesome guy, an awesome teammate. He's very encouraging even when he's not playing well. Those are the kinds of things that you want. But the problem is it doesn't matter if you can't bat over the Mendoza line, Joe. So that just is what it is. We also need to talk real quickly about why the hell David Bell keeps going to Fernando Cruz. That ERA has ballooned to an almost 5 at this point, Joe. You know how I feel about reliever ERAs. At times they can be inflated. At this point in the season, we're especially not talking about inflation. And it is happening with every single time he comes in. I'm worried that he's going to give up a run. I'm not going to lie to you. When it was 1-0 and they brought in Fernando Cruz, I put my phone down. Joe, I stopped watching the game because I said, we are going to lose this game. I checked back in 15 minutes later and it was 2-0 or 2-1. And I said, I literally turned to my girlfriend and my dad, who I was talking to at the time, and I said, well, that'll do it. That's it. So it's just like you just know. And that's what I don't like. I loved last year where it was like, this team maybe has that opportunity to come back. They're going to scrap. They're going to fight. Right? Like now it just doesn't feel like they have that. And it's very disappointing. And I just don't understand why David Bell has decided, like early on, it made sense. Fernando Cruz was getting people out at an astounding rate. He was almost all-star worthy. But the last month and a half has just been an unmitigated disaster, Joe. And I can't watch it anymore. You have guys who are getting people out. I know that they haven't put Buck Farmer and Lucas Sims necessarily in the hardest situations. But even Tony Santillan has been very solid since he has come up. Put somebody else in that 7th and 8th inning. Please. It has to be. If you really, if this team really believes in themselves, regardless of what they do at the trade deadline, and they say, we're only 5 games out, guys, we can go on a run and find our way back into this thing, then they need to pull David Bell aside and say, dude, either get rid of Fernando Cruz or start putting him in less important situations, because he is costing this team so many games. I think he's lost them 8 games this year, Joe. Maybe more technically. But I think he's 3-8 currently. And I think losses to relievers do matter, because that shows you're actually actively losing the team the game when you were in the game. So just a wild thing to me. And I had to point it out because it's been unbelievably frustrating to watch.
Well, I think it's more of a bullpen usage as a whole, right? We talked last week, and you mentioned it earlier, Rob, that that I mentioned earlier, that the Fernando Cruz coming in for a clean inning is a disaster. He just doesn't know what to do. He is the firefighter. If there's runners on, he does a good job. It's really weird. But then you bring in Lucas Sims, who is the worst with runners on base I have ever seen for the Reds. He is so bad. He should not be a reliever. We should be trading him. His ERA is down, and that's fine. If there's a clean inning, he can come in and get someone else. But he does not live up to the pressure ever. Ever, he never does. And his runners on base, it's not his fault that the Reds lost yesterday, because it was Cruz getting people on base and he walked someone in for the game-winning run. But why? Like, we know this. We know Fernando Cruz is good when there's people on. The splitter does tremendous work when there's people on base. We know Lucas Sims cannot get people out when there are people on base. It just, he cannot. And then, like, I get that there's a tough decision because Alexis Diaz also walks people every single time he goes in the game. So at the end of the day, we can sit here, and I think the bullpen stats are inflated. Our bullpen ERA is pretty low overall for the year. There are not many guys who are pitching well this year. You can say, oh, Lucas Sims has 3.67 ERA. It doesn't matter. If you can't put him in high leverage situations, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Alexis Diaz walks guys. Fernando Cruz obviously can't come into the clean inning. Suter has hit his issues this year. It is like, I'm trying to find a guy that I truly trust to go in and get people out, and I can't do it. Justin Wilson's been awful this year. I know Robbie and you both have talked about how we would prefer him not being on the team and have different lefties. I guess Sam Ball is our best bet, and that's fine. But that's like all we've got. I don't know. I just can't believe it. I think, we can sit there and kind of like, oh, this guy's done okay here or there. Like, this part of the season, Fernando Cruz was good. That part of the season, Lucas Sims was good. Overall, they have been bad. And it's not fun to see having some of these starters get, a chance at a win and be taken away by the relievers, or, vice versa. We actually score runs one game and relievers can't hold the lead. It's part of the frustration of the whole season. And I know bullpens get a lot of the issues that the people come up with, but it has been an inflated stats for them where I just can't believe that their ERA is so low overall. I don't know. Like, I never felt this level of distrust in the bullpen before in my life.
Well, and what's wild to me, Joe, is Fernando Cruz has the most games on the team by 9, which is a lot for a reliever, to be clear. Mm-hmm. That's literally one more game basically a week for most of the season than everybody else. Sims is second. The guy I'm looking at right now is why Buck Farmer has 14 less games than Fernando Cruz. The whip is lower. The average is about the same. I know he's not as big of a strikeout guy, but he's not giving up a ton of hits. He's got a 2.68 ERA. Like, why are we not? And I'm not the biggest Buck Farmer guy, but like, and I know he's been doing mostly middle relief. It's not been later, problematic, which is what we saw last year. His ERA gets a little bit inflated in the 7th and 8th innings, but you're right. Or like you said, if Sims is better in a clean inning, then start the inning with Sims and then go to Cruz. Like, it's very obvious to me that they're not being used correctly as well. And for God's sakes, Tony Santillan has had a solid year. I think he really would have pitched better in the major leagues than in AAA. I think he was just really upset about getting sent down to AAA at the beginning of the season. But he's coming in 5 games. He's given up 2 hits, and he has struck out 9 guys, Joe. He's striking out almost 2 guys an inning right now. Why is he not getting more time? I just don't understand. Like, it should be, for me, it should be Santillan, Mole, and Farmer right now. And if you need to get Sims and Cruz their confidence back, do it. That's fine. But I also think they need to trade Cruz. Just get rid of him. I don't care what you can get for him. Just get rid of him. He's 34 years old. He will literally never have more value than he has at this deadline. Never. For the rest of his entire career. I am willing to bet a piece of gum on it. I don't know. Like, it has to happen. I can't keep watching this, Joe. It's very disappointing. Even Nick Martinez. Why is he not getting used in the 8th and the 9th innings more often? Like, he's been an excellent guy out of your bullpen. His ERA is only close to a 4 because of his horrible starts. Like, it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me the way that this bullpen is getting used. I don't know if it's Derek Johnson. I don't know if it's David Bell, but David Bell does ultimately have the final say as to who's going to go out there. And it's been just an unmitigated disaster at times in games when you need it. Like, that's why their ERA is low, is that in games that they don't need to do anything, they just don't. You know, they'll pitch well, and then in close games, they're just not getting it done. Like, they're only feeling like they're giving up runs when it matters most. And I know that's kind of what the bullpen is, but at the same time, like, it is wild to me. Like, I'm looking at these ERAs, and I'm like, realistically, their ERA's not too bad, honestly. Alexis Diaz, I know he's been frustrating, but he's still 20 of 22 in saves. Like, he truly is reminding me of Coco Cordero right now, Joe, where we felt like Coco was always in trouble. There was a game, I remember, there was a game where the Reds were up, I think, 4 this year, and I was like, Diaz is going to get the save here. And it was because I knew he was going to end up giving up a run or two. He ended up giving, I think, 2 runs up, and he got the save technically. And I was like, this is wild. Like, this should not be happening right now. I am truly struggling with this team. Like, Diaz isn't even striking out a batter per inning right now. He's a little under, but still, like, you would expect your closer to be doing a little bit more than that, like he did last year. It's mind blowing to me, Joe.
It's so confusing to me how we can be so. Some people would say forward thinking. I don't agree with it, but like so new age baseball with the way we use our batters, right? Where it's always got to be righty lefty. It's always got to be a matchup problem. Always got to be something else. Whereas with the pitchers, we don't do that at all, right? Like Diaz is always the closer, and you see other teams sometimes they bring the closer in earlier, sometimes they bring him in later, sometimes they move things around these days because of the way pitching goes. We also had this week, I forget what game it was. It may have been yesterday. I have no idea. We had David Bell bring in Lucas Sims to face a lefty in a high leverage situation. We had Sam Ball just sitting there. Like,
yep.
Why do we care so much on one end of the spectrum with hitting, but not on the other end with pitching? So, you know, again, to put this mildly, it is not just the relievers' faults are being put in these situations. Like, if we know Lucas Sims is bad with inherited runners, why are we putting him in this spot? If we know Fernando Cruz is bad with clean innings, weird and probably means he's a bad pitcher and just lucky. I understand that. But why are we putting him in that spot? If we know Alexis Diaz is going to walk guys, why are we putting him out there in different spots? And you're right. Maybe it's just he needs to be in a save opportunity because he's just awful otherwise. But I don't know what it is. It just seems like there's a whole lot of different ideals going on in the clubhouse and not one focus. If we're trying to say that matchups matter on one end, but matchups don't matter on the other. And that brings me back to like the whole organizational failure. Yeah, the relievers aren't doing good in their spots. David Bell isn't using them the right way. I think we could have gotten more relief help this offseason. Well, I did think we had a lot of good relievers.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can agree that we didn't have an elite reliever. Like, yeah, Alexis Diaz has been a good closer before, and like Lucas Sims has been a nice piece at different times. But like, we didn't go out and get guys who could really help this team. So that's what's frustrating to me is like it does come back to these guys haven't performed. David Bell hasn't put these guys in the best positions to perform, and I do think they are missing something out of this bullpen. Whether it's guys in the late innings who can get guys out or whatever. Because honestly, if you have an eighth inning guy who's good at this point, and you say that's your eighth inning guy, and you kind of look at things, Rob, and you say, oh, well, Lucas Sims isn't in those situations. Or Fernando Cruz can be used earlier, and we'll see if he is good or not. But now he's in these high-leverage situations without much history of success in those historically. Earlier this year he did have them, but historically. And now we're in this spot where we don't know who to trust in the eighth inning, and we're throwing Alexis Diaz out there by default in the ninth, which, again, if there's a save opportunity, fine. If not, I mean, hold on to your hats.
Yeah, it's been wild. It truly has. And I'm like looking... Sam Moll, even after getting sent down, has been in 32 games. So they have used him a decent amount, but I want to see him more. I mean, he's got the lowest whip outside of Tony Santillan, who and Yosiver Zuleta, I believe is how you pronounce that. I can't remember exactly. But like it's very frustrating. And then you get rid of Alex Young for Justin Wilson, who has almost the same amount of innings and games as Sam Moll, but has almost a double the ERA. Like, it's just wild. It really is. I don't. He's got the highest batting average against. We still use Justin Wilson, and he's got a 282 batting average against. That'd be one of the best batting averages in baseball right now, Joe. For a hitter, like that's so bad. That is so unbelievable. In the year of pitching, to have. And I think that's the other thing that we have to take into consideration. This year has been very pitcher heavy. There are very few batters that are batting close to 300 or above right now. If you have people who are batting over 300, they are elite this season, right? It's not like it has been in the past. And for me, if the batting average against isn't below, we'll say 220, 230, you're not getting it done. If the whip is not below 1.2, we'll say 1.3 maybe, you're just not getting it done. So, if you're not striking out at least a batter an inning, especially as a reliever, you're just not getting it done, Joe. It's very disappointing to see. I'm really hoping that the Reds can kind of retool their bullpen for this last 2 months, because here's what I'm going to say. Regardless of what they trade away, they're not going to be trading away anything that's going to ultimately hurt this team significantly, in my mind. The only player that could be is Jonathan India. Everybody else that they trade away, especially, their gluttony of, as you're calling them, and I think you're right, inflated bullpen arms, like that doesn't matter. Like, the only bullpen arm that they should keep truly is Sam Moll. That's it. I'd keep him. You got him under contract. He's been awesome. He does his job. I know that would mean, oh, maybe you should trade him. No, if you want to make a run next year, you got to at least have one guy that you can trust. And I think that Moll might be that guy. He did it last year. He's done it this year. He even did it with the A's the year, earlier last year. Like, I think I can say that he seems like he's doing all right. Everybody else, they're on expiring contracts. Be gone. Let's get him out of here. Let's stop dealing with him. I don't even care that Fernando Cruz isn't on an expiring contract. I liked him. He's a great guy. It seems like he's got a lot of heart, and he's doing a lot for a guy who's never found it until the last year or two, where he just couldn't even make a club. But the nice story has to end. 8 losses is unacceptable as a reliever. You just can't do it. You're costing your team. You are literally costing your team games. So, I can't subscribe to that one, Joe. That's about it for me on that one. So, we'll move in here then to the trade deadline, Joe. Tuesday, so tomorrow, 6 p.m. It used to be 4. It also used to be on the 1st. Now it's randomly on the 30th. I have no idea why. And then I saw a report, Joe, which is interesting, that apparently there are 3 teams who are looking at Montas right now. I'm guessing you saw this as well. The Reds are apparently trying to combine him with Nick Martinez, and they were looking specifically at Baltimore's prospects. So I will say, as we were recording this, Michael Lorenzen got traded to the Royals from the Rangers. I think the Rangers have some extra pitching that they could be gone of, because they have Scherzer and DeGrom and Tyler Mahle all coming back, I believe. So they're the other team that I think would be trading away pitchers for sure. Feels like the Reds could get a lot for Montas, considering what they gave up for him, which is essentially, I don't know, $8 million, because they won't have to pay the full amount of his contract, maybe 10. So I would be willing to trade him, I think, especially for Martinez as well. I wish Emilio Pagan was healthy, because I'd be very happy to see him be gone as well. That just feels like an inflated contract that his injury timing unfortunately means he'll be around for next year. But where are you at with this? And I guess the last question I'll throw to you as well, Joe, is why do we see teams like the Cubs being able to go out and get an Isaac Paredes and, for Christopher Morel and some other stuff, but the Reds are unwilling to make any sort of, even lateral move, it would feel like. It's just wild to me, to be honest with you. So go through your trade deadline thoughts with all that in mind.
Yeah, Jeff Passan of ESPN mentioned that it's the Cubs use the deadline of we're gonna make sure we get better no matter what. So if it's, hey, we want to sell and get prospects, that's great. If we want to get a guy who we think is gonna help next year, we're gonna do it. And maybe that's because they can afford to do a big market team. But yeah, I don't think you're right. It doesn't change the fortunes of the Cubs in my mind. They're still a team that's going to be probably on the outside looking in on the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But it would be nice to have an aggressive front office. We just don't have that. So that's what we're going to have to do. Yeah, I'm cool on trading Montas. Get rid of him. 5 ERA. Rob, you mentioned how much the pitching stats are up for the rest of the league, and hitting stats are down. 5.01 ERA at this point. 8 losses for a reliever is really bad, but still kind of bad is 8 losses for a starter at this rate, the way we use pitchers. If you give up that many runs to lose games without even pitching that many innings, he has 8 losses and 93 innings pitched. That's not good. So I do think people are looking for back end of the rotation guys they can kind of tweak. Maybe we tweak this and tweak that, and then they get better. Maybe their ballpark will support him better. So I'm cool with trading Montas. I'm cool with trading Martinez. I'm cool with trading anyone in the bullpen. I really do think bullpens change year to year, and I think we can patch one together for next year. I'm not going to say I want to trade Sambo, but if the offers are out there that are amazing, some of these other teams are getting for relief pitchers, then some of them aren't even good relief pitchers, but they're getting good prospects in return.
That's a good point.
You might have to make that trade. And then, going to the hitters, how much value a lot of them have. I know India has value. I would like to keep them, but again, if it is really a seller's market and you can get a lot of prospects for them or get someone who's going to help us in the next couple of years, I would probably trade them, but I think it has to be a return that is worth it when he has 2.5 years left of club control. So that's kind of the thing is like we have a guy we know he can hit. We're still waiting on Marte. We're still waiting on CAS. I mentioned this last week. If the value is high enough where you get, hey, maybe we need to trade him because I know the Yankees are interested in him. Probably not anymore with Jazz Chisholm going over there, but someone will be interested in him as well. Kind of think about it. I mean, I would think about trading him. I probably would lean on not doing it unless the return is great, but that's where I'm at with it. I would also say trade Jamer. If anyone else wants to be traded, obviously keep Ellie, you keep Steer, you keep McLean. But other than that, I'm pretty open to trading whoever. I probably keep Stevenson too. It's hard to find catchers that are that quality. Pretty solid guys, but other than that, I'm cool with trading whoever because I don't think it's going to happen this year, and I'd rather gear up for next year.
Give me whatever the package needs to be for Jason Dominguez. Do it. We missed out. Yeah. We missed out on Aaron Judge. The very first piece I ever wrote for the Game House, Joe, was, I think it was the first one. One of the first ones was the Reds trading Johnny Cueto to the Yankees for a young guy who had not made it yet, who was a little older than most prospects, who was just figuring it out, named Aaron Judge. Can you imagine if they had done that instead of what they ultimately traded Johnny Cueto for? Potentially could have been franchise changing, to be honest. But I'm not saying that I'm that smart or anything. I'm just saying if you see a guy with that kind of raw talent, regardless of age, and Jason Dominguez is named the alien for a reason, go get him if he is actually available. I don't know if he would be, but depends on how much pressure the Yankees are feeling to actually go for it, is what I will say. I think truly India and Candelario are the only ones with trade value. I don't even know if Candy does, but he might. Team control, the guy bats around 240, 250. I think he's a solid. I think he's a great sixth hitter in your lineup in terms of like your fifth or sixth best hitter. Currently, he's like the third or fourth best on the Reds. So finding that middle value could be nice, but I don't think either of them are going to go anywhere. And if for some godforsaken reason they decide to trade somebody like Spencer Steer, I will cry. I will actively come on here and cry probably. So the Reds are going to be making moves. I guarantee you some move will be made. I don't know what, but I think they will make at least one move, Joe. I just think somebody's going to come after a reliever. Somebody's going to come after Montas. I think the Reds know they've got to get rid of Montas at this point. There's no reason to have him in my mind. I think they just call Graham Ashcraft back up when he's healthy. With Carson Spires back, you got your big three. You have them, and it sounds like maybe Williamson is on his way back, Joe. Maybe. We'll have to see. So, and it seems like Matt McLain is. He's taking BP. He's taking ground balls. There's a very real possibility that he could be playing baseball in AAA here in the next couple weeks, which is pretty wild to say, considering how the year started out for him. I'm hearing reports that he sounds and feels healthy, like his arm feels pretty good. So, if that's the case, then great. Good for the Reds. But I got to ask, Joe, when is this rebuild going to end in your mind? Or when does it have to end? Those are two, I think, very different questions, more than people probably realize. Where are you at, with this rebuild that has been going on since essentially 2021?
Yeah, this is the frustrating thing. It seems like it's a cycle for Cincinnati fans of rebuild, have a team that should be good and isn't good enough to make the playoffs, or if you get in the playoffs because of an extra COVID, expanded playoffs, then you lose in the first round. So that's my fear if this is going to go well, theoretically next year you make the playoffs. Like you don't have to win anything and you get the playoffs. You have to make the playoffs. You have to put a team around Ellie and Steer and McLean and the 3 starting pitchers to make the playoffs. And if you have those 6 or so pieces set, it's not that hard. It really isn't. Like, especially the starting pitching, you just have to go get a couple free agents. So the problem has always been, is the front office going to invest? And again, we both said like, hey, the offseason was kind of good last year, but could have been better. They went and got guys. They paid money for Frankie Montas, 5 ERA. Like we paid a guy like at that rate. Graham Ashcraft's the same thing. I mean, let's just put up. Like why do we need Frankie Montas? So, we got Jamer, very decent free agent, but didn't really push anything forward for this team. He had a good stretch where maybe he did, but like overall, he's not really pushing things forward. He's not a star. So 2025 has to be playoffs. It has to be we invest in some money into this team and not just, we're waiting for our guys to come up or we're signing our own guys to contracts. They need help. We found out this year they need a lot more help than we thought. And that's okay. Because I think we thought we had other guys who were already on the roster would step up. But that to me is kind of the big thing here. Will we spend the money on free agency? Will we go get the JD Martinez that I always talk about, who's doing well for the Mets right now and pushing them towards the play? They're in the playoffs right now. They've started right now. So are we going to do that? Are we going to go get, hey, we have 3 really good starting pitchers. Are we going to get a guy who's a proven, maybe an ace, or maybe a guy who's a second pitcher in a rotation just to shore things up rather than taking a chance on Frankie Montas, who was coming off injury and not the same pitcher that he once was? Are we going to do those things is the big question. I don't know if 2025 is going to answer those questions because we just have shown as a front office that we don't do that. That's what it should be. It should be 2025. It might take a couple more years because it might be the way it looks right now and the way they're investing. It looks like we need our own guys to come up and help, and that's going to take possibly Rhett Lauder coming up, possibly Chase Burns coming up, and possibly other guys too. Cam Collier developing, and that means all those guys hit too. So maybe 2 to 3 years. Edwin Arroyo too. Maybe 2 to 3 years if the Reds do things the way they're currently doing it. If they actually invest a little bit into this team and actually go get a high priority free agent, a hitter, you tell them, hey, you can hit 40 home runs in this ballpark easy. We've had Gino Suarez, who had never been that big of a power hitter, hit almost 50. And we can actually do something. We can do something here. So 2025 should be the year we make the playoffs, and then maybe 2026 really compete for things. The way things are currently going, maybe not so quickly.
It has to be 2025 in my mind. I think you will be wasting too many. We like to talk about rookie contracts in the NFL, right? We have so many young guys who are going to be around for a while, and I think one of the bigger pieces that people are not talking about is Tyler Stevenson. When he is out of arbitration, right? When he is done, that is going to be a significant contract because by then he'll probably be one of the best catchers, at least hitting wise. Probably defensively with the way he's been improving as well in baseball at that point. Because I think it just takes catchers a longer time. He's had an injury history the last few years. And you want a consistent guy back there. If you lose him, it can be very detrimental to lose your starting catcher. And I don't know that they have anybody who they've drafted in the last few years who is coming up. I'm looking at the active 2025 payroll for next year. If they get rid of Montas and they don't pay him, and they get rid of Martinez, Joe, they will have 40,000 or 40 million, in adjusted payroll. That's Jeimer Candelario. That's 8 million for Emilio Pagan, 6.3 for Hunter Green, 5 for Jonathan India, 3.5 for Luke Maile, and 3.5 for Brent Suter, because I think they'll probably keep Brent Suter at that point. There's just no reason, Joe. Like, they have the money. Even this year, they have the money. They do. They have plenty of payroll to go get people. They need to do it. They need to. If the Cubs can still find ways to get better at the deadline by trading Christopher Morel, who I thought was going to be their middle of the order guy for years, and they said, nah, we like Paredes better. Now, Morel feels like he's going to be a great Rays guy. I'm going to be honest with you. So I'm glad he's out of the division at this point. I don't think he's like a huge detriment to us, but I feel like that Rays team is going to do a lot with him. I'm at the point where they need to start making moves to actually win. They still can do it even within their payroll problems that they're having. I think maybe they're just not selling it, but I'm hopeful that, with Ellie coming on, Joe, with Hunter Green coming on, like, people are going to start to see kind of the Joe Burrow effect that we've seen. I hate to compare it always to the Bengals, but that is how it's been. I mean, people have literally stated straight up, I went to the Bengals because of Joe Burrow, right? Like, they believe in the Bengals now because of him. If Ellie De La Cruz is going to be here, I just checked. He's not going to be a free agent until 2030, I believe. Okay? We got plenty of years of Ellie left. The same is going to be with Steer. I don't think that Hunter Green is a free agent until 2029. You have years to do it. It's time to start bringing in some guys because some of these young guys are going to be ready. You have the young pitching. You need a back end of the bullpen ace kind of guy. But other than that, I think you've got some decent guys for the middle. Like, I still am of the belief, Joe, that if they added one more big bat and a solid reliever, that this team could even make a run this year. I'm just going to be honest. I don't believe it because I don't think the Reds are going to go out and do that. Apparently, Brent Rooker, the guy who I think would be the best option for them right now, is apparently not available. I don't know if you heard that, but the A's, for some reason, are not putting him or Joey Wendell up, which makes zero sense to me. Might be one of the biggest, stupidest things I've ever heard in my entire life. And then Mason Miller breaking his hand is just ironic for that A's organization. But there's just the Reds have to. I think they have to in the next 6 months between now and free agency in December. The Reds have to go do things to get this team ready because I just don't know, especially with all the hype we had for this year, Joe. I just don't know if we can sit around and wait for another year of Marte to figure it out, CES to figure it out. I do think they can, and I think they will be very good. I think Marte is probably going to have a great next 2 months. That just seems to be what he does because he did it last year, and he did it when he was in the minors as well. He's still only 22. Like, same as Ellie. Like, they have young guys that can, but you got to mix them in with real vets. You said at the beginning of the year, Jeimer Candelario is not that main vet. You were right. I was wrong on that one. I will totally admit that. But good Lord, go find an outfielder. Please, go find a back end of the bullpen guy. Just do it. You have the money. Hell, they could have paid Shohei Ohtani's salary for the next 5 years with how many guys they have in arbitration and still been under, they still wouldn't have even been a top 10 payroll in baseball.
Well, so that's what's crazy is it's just hard to expect them to actually do it, but they have the pieces to do it and build a team that has financial success, which it's not like the Reds are not pulling in gate receipts right now. I mean,
yeah,
it's still, they're making money and everything, but they could do a lot more if they put a little bit more into this team. And every single championship team we talk about has the same thing. They have a couple guys built from the core, sometimes more than us. Like, the Yankees had the core four. That's only four. It's the Yankees. They spent money on everyone else, but they still had the core four. You go to like the Astros. Yes, they had some help from some trash cans, and that is what it is. But they built such a good crop of young talent. But what did they do once they had that talent? They went and got Justin Verlander. They got big name free agents to help him. It wasn't just guys who were kind of average. They went and got stars, and you have to do that to help the young guys. So even the Braves a couple of years ago, some of their stars were hurt, and they went and made trade deadline acquisitions to get them a World Series from guys that a couple of them weren't the stars, but they guys who stepped up in big moments. You have to be aggressive in these situations. If they want to sell this trade deadline, fine. I don't care. Get more prospects. Get the depth in the organization better because our depth isn't the greatest, as we mentioned, in AAA, even AA guys who are ready to come up. That's fine. But if you do that, then the goal this offseason has to be, we're going to go sign at least one or two high-profile free agents and then several more role players to help this team get to where it needs to be. Hard to see the Reds ownership doing that. Obviously, we come from a city like Cincinnati where we've been burned before. We get our expectations up like we did this season. Mm-hmm. But that's what needs to happen if this team is going to pan out. Otherwise, you start getting players disgruntled that they aren't winning, probably players are disgruntled with the manager, with the front office and everything, and then it makes it harder to sign these deals. It's fine that this year didn't work out. It really is. It sucks. It's awful. Yeah. It's fine it didn't work out. Now you have to be aggressive and make sure next year does work out.
Nah, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. We got to move on. We got two more things to go over here, including the games for this week, Joe. Sorry, guys, it's a little longer one just because it is the trade deadline episode. We're going to call it that. Unless the Reds go out and do like a flurry of moves, I don't anticipate that you will be getting a second episode this week. Even then, I don't know. You might just have to go to Twitter to find us. But Joe, has Hunter Green entered ace status in your mind? His ERA, I'm going to give you his stats so far this year. 7-4 with a 2.97 ERA, 21 games started, most by our team, him and Abbott. 124 innings pitched. He hasn't even given up 100 hits this year yet. 82 hits. His biggest problem was home runs. He's cut those in half. He's at only 10. He has hit a ton of batters, which is wild, 16, but that is what it is. Walk rate is low, 49. 138 strikeouts, which is one of the best in baseball. I'd have to pull that up here in just a second, Joe, while we're talking. 105 whip, and what's most impressive, Joe, a 188 batting average against. I want to give the last thing here. Over his last 7 games, he has a 1.71 ERA. 7 starts, obviously. 42 innings pitched. He's averaging 6 innings per game. When last year we were just praying he could get through 5. 22 hits. He's not even giving up a hit every other inning. Only 8 runs. 12 walks. 49 strikeouts. A whip of .81. Joe, I'm like I officially declared the Red season over. I think Hunter Green has figured it out. I think adding those 2 extra pitches has helped him immensely. He's not wasting a ton of pitches anymore like he was doing even earlier in the season. He's realizing that he doesn't have to strike out 10 guys a game to win, and yet he's still one of the best pitchers in baseball when it comes to strikeouts. The young man, in my mind, is figuring it out, Joe, and he's doing it in a big way. He's still a top 10 pitcher in terms of strikeouts in baseball. He's tied with Sonny Gray and Joe Ryan for 9th right now. He's 4 strikeouts behind Freddie Peralta and 6. He is only 11 off the pace with Chris Sale, who's having a Cy Young type year. It's impressive. I can't say anything else, Joe, than I'm loving what I'm seeing out of this guy. The last thing I will give real quick. The only person with a lower batting average against in the top 10 is Tyler Glasnow with a 185. Dylan Cease just threw a no-hitter, and he still has a higher batting average against than Hunter Green this year. It's wild. It's amazing. I'm so freaking pumped for him.
Yeah, my bold take before the season is that Hunter Green would turn into an ace and be in the Cy Young conversation, and he's blowing my mind even still. Like, I thought, maybe his numbers would be a little bit worse, but maybe he'd have more run support, so maybe he'd be like 10 wins right now or something like that, maybe 11. And that's obviously hurts the Cy Young talks. We saw that a while ago with Jacob deGrom and all that, 5, 6, 7 or whatever it was years ago. He's an ace. I think there'll still be some trouble in the future. I think just with a pitcher like him, there's going to be those wasted pitches. There's going to be starts that don't go your way where you're throwing hard, but they're also hitting it hard back at you. But he's an ace. He's can be relied on next year. I think what we found out about our young guys is valuable. Like we said with Ellie earlier, Rob, it's good we found out that he can hit 263 for a season at this point of the year. It's good that, the strikeouts still a concern, still always going to be a concern, but, he can somewhat cut them down a little bit. And even Abbott and Lodolo, too. We have so many nice young pieces that are performing this year, and it's just awful that no one else stepped up with them. So that makes the offseason earlier. Since we just talked about the offseason, Rob, it's, hey, maybe you don't need to go get an ace. Maybe you need to go get a number 2 starter. Maybe you need to go get a number 3 starter. Whatever it is, you can have multiple aces on a staff too. Yeah. I don't really care about that, but whatever it is, it gives us leverage of saying, no, we have an ace. Let's go get some depth in this starting rotation, or let's let these guys battle it out, or whatever it is. It makes it very nice that Hunter Green has stepped up, and I think the Reds have 2 of the best young stars in the game when you got Green and Ellie. At least maybe the best duo. I mean, other teams have like Paul Skeens on the Pirates and O'Neill Cruz. I would take the Reds over them. You have guys like Bobby Witt with the Royals. I mean, I would take the Reds duo over anyone else you throw into Bobby Witt. So it's really cool to have an ace young starting pitcher who was homegrown and a star that people not just in Cincinnati know about, but around all of Major League Baseball are following Ellie De La Cruz on a daily basis. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. And I would like to point out, too, he's pitched in almost the same amount of games as he did last year, Joe, which is pretty wild to think about. He'll ultimately probably end up having at least 17 more innings pitched, likely going to be almost 30 less hits. than he did last year. He's 23 runs under at this point. He's literally cut his home runs in half. His strikeout numbers are down and his walks are about the same, but he's pitching to contact more, I think, which is what's important. And he's doing so in a way that's making sense. His batting average against is 70 points lower, which is absolutely nuts. The guy is pitching smart. He's become more of a pitcher than he is a thrower. I do love that comparison because it's a very real thing in baseball. Pitchers and throwers are very, very different things. There are guys who can throw hard, and then there are guys who know how to pitch around batters. And I think we're starting to see young Hunter Greene. And I like to remind people, that's why I keep saying this, young. He's only 24 years old. There are a lot of pitchers who are going into their 40s. This is just the beginning of his career. There's a real world where if Hunter Greene loves baseball enough and he's still throwing in the mid-90s, by the time he's 40, he could go. I mean, look at Charlie Morton. Look at, I'm trying to think of some of these other guys. I mean, even Greinke to a certain degree. Kershaw's, who's been hurt a lot. Like, there's still a lot of guys who can do it, and he's just been great. It's been really fun to watch, and it seems like he's just going to continue to get better. I really do believe, Joe, that these other two pitches that he's adding will only get stronger along with his fastball and his slider, and he's just going to become an electric guy for this team. And I completely agree with you. I don't know if there's a hitter and a pitcher who are under the age of 25 that I would take over the Reds right now. You guys can let us know. Bobby Witt Jr. is amazing as a hitter, but I think Ellie's going to catch that pretty soon. I don't know if he'll ever have a 340 season or whatever that Bobby Witt's having, but I do think that Hunter Greene can kind of even that level out. So it's pretty cool to see. We're both saying officially ace status, but we're going to move on, Joe. We got the Cubs, and we got the Giants this week. It's going to be Carson Spires versus Jameson Taillon. Frankie Montas is theoretically going on Tuesday. Don't know if that's going to happen, if I'm being honest with you, because the game is also at 7:10. So I would put that one up to more of a question mark at this point. I just don't see the Reds keeping Montas, but we'll see. Maybe they'll surprise me and really piss me off. But against Justin Steele, Nick Lodolo versus Kyle Hendricks. Closer, Hector Neris is 17 of 18 since taking over. He's having a pretty solid season. Lineup of Nico Horner, Patrick Wisdom, Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ, Isaac Paredes, Dansby Swanson, David Bodie, Pete Crow, Armstrong, Miguel Amaya, with a bench consisting of Christian Bethencourt, Michael Busch, Miles Mastrobuoni, and Mike Tauchman. They just added Paredes. Bellinger will probably be back potentially during the series. I shouldn't say probably. There's a chance he'll be back during the series. Suzuki, Busch, and Horner are doing very well. Imanaga, who we are yet again dodging, but he has come back down to earth. But Justin Steele has definitely found it. Taillon has been very solid. Their starting pitching has honestly been outstanding, but their bullpen is suspect. If you can keep it close by the time you get to the 6th, 7th, or 8th, 9th even innings, then you're in a pretty good position to potentially find your momentum and take the lead. Joe, where are you at with this series? It is going to be during the trade deadline. It looks like the Cubs are adding, the Reds are not. So where are you at with it?
Yeah, tough team to play right now. I know their record is below 500, but obviously adding Paredes helps. It's good that we are playing them without Bellinger. I feel like Bellinger in this ballpark just tough to deal with. They have plenty of hurt bullpen pieces as well. So maybe if we get to the bullpen, that can be a big help. My problem is their starters in the first two games are very good, in Taillon and Steele. I think we can win the last one. I think we can beat Kyle Hendricks. Historically, we hit Kyle Hendricks very well. I remember Aquino had his 3-home run game off of Hendricks. It kind of wants me to have Rhys Hines be brought up because similar players and similar, if you don't throw it hard, and it's, again, they can sometimes catch up to it. For some reason, the fastball of Kyle Hendricks was perfect for Aquino's swing, which sometimes was too long, but other people would strike him out with. But I think that'd be kind of cool. But, I think 1 and 2, I think they can win that game, Lodolo versus Hendricks, in the last game of the series. I think both teams could look different throughout the course of the series. As you mentioned, Bellinger could come back. The Reds can make some moves that send people off. The Cubs can bring moves to bring people in. Or I could see them making other trades that send people out, too. They're 5 games under 500 as well. And I think they're just making smart moves. So, they could hey, we have someone we want to trade and get a lot of prospects back, I could see them reloading for the future as well. So makes it tough to predict, but with the way the pitching matchups are lining up, I will say 1-2, and we probably win that Lodolo versus Hendricks game.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go 2-1, Joe. The main reason is we're already 5-2 against them this year. We seemingly played the Cubs pretty well. I think Spires versus Taeyeon is gonna be a pretty good series. I just that's that middle game that I'm pretty iffy about, to be honest with you. And I think Hendricks is going to be perfect. I think our guys are going to tee off on him because it's the mid to upper 90s fastball up that has been giving the Reds a lot of trouble this year. I don't know that Hendricks is pitching over like 91, 92 even right now. So I think he's actually in the low eight or mid to low 80s, right? Yeah, it's like I think he's
It's
still
like
in like
80, 86, 87.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember. I was like, I'm pretty sure that he's one of the few guys that are still around throwing 87, 88. I think this Reds team tees off, and I think Lodolo has a pretty good game against them. So even though I think that this Cubs team, I think hits lefties pretty decently. They have a lot of good right-handed bats in their lineup, especially with Paredes coming over too. But regardless, I am going to pick 2-1. Not that it's going to end up mattering for the Reds. Ultimately, they'll still be 4 games under, but I just think that it makes sense here. We head to the Giants, 1-2 in our series against them in San Francisco. We don't know for sure who's going against us, but it looks like it's lining up to be Andrew Abbott, Hunter Green, and Carson Spires. Their closer, Camilo Duval, having a good season, 20 of 24. Jorge Soler is batting leadoff. I did not know that, Joe. That is very interesting to me. But you got him, Yastrzemski, Heliot Ramos, Michael Conforto. We'll see. He may be traded by then. I've heard rumors that he may be going back to the Mets, which is interesting. Tyler Fitzgerald, Matt Chapman, David Villar, Derek Hill, Patrick Bailey with old friend Kirk Casale, Lamonte Wade Jr., Casey Schmidt, and Brett Wisely. More than likely, Wilmer Flores will be back. Joe, both teams will be different by the time that this happens. I'm hearing Blake Snell even may get traded from the Giants right now, which is very interesting. But Chapman, Ramos, Fitzgerald, and Bailey are all hitting pretty well this season. Their starting pitching has been awful, though. Their pitching in general has not been great, but their starting pitching has been some of the worst that I've seen the Reds go up against. Generally speaking, that plays into the Reds' favor, especially since they're going to be at home. I hate to do this because it's going to be after trade deadline, but I do think the Reds are actually going to go 2-1 in this one as well. I like Abbott and Green starting it off against them, regardless of who they throw, honestly. And I think that the Giants are going to have more subtractions than the Reds will at this trade deadline, if I'm being honest with you, Joe. And I think that, even Chapman realistically could get traded. I don't think it's likely, I should say, but there is a world where they could end up trading Matt Chapman as well, or even Jorge Soler, I guess, if somebody gives them the right stuff. But I just think that this Giants team, I don't think in general is as good as the Reds either. We're playing at home. As long as the Reds don't have too many players that have been traded away and are not too far down on themselves, I think there's a real chance the Reds could go 2-1 in this series.
I'm going 2-1 as well. This Giants team, I don't think is very good at all.
No.
I'm surprised that they have the record that they do right now at 53 and 55. It's one of those series where you could see the Reds deflated after the trade deadline. Usually that does happen if you trade players away or if you don't make any moves to get better too. Players kind of realize that. But I don't know what this Giants team was put together to try to do. Like, it's kind of like a halfway we're trying to win, halfway we're trying to not win. There's not many good players on the roster. Jorge Soler, as you mentioned, is batting leadoff. I don't know what the strategy is here. Maybe hoping that Blake Snell would save them at some point. I don't know. But I think the Reds are better than them. I'll go 2-1 on this one. I do think partially because we have Abbott and Green going in these games, I think is part of the reason why I'm going to go with them as well. Should be 2-1. We'll see what happens with the trade deadline. We'll see what happens with the Reds' morale going after this. We'll see if they want to make a run here in the next couple of weeks and see what they can do with that. So,
yeah, it would be interesting. Like I said, their schedule for the rest of the year, Joe, is still nothing too concerning. I still think that they can be better and should be better than teams like the Pirates and the Cardinals and the Cubs. Even the Braves they face again, and we're seeing that the Braves may just completely fall apart at this point. They have been playing horribly. The Padres have their issues. The Mets have their issues. Like, there are teams that the Reds can make a run. I will say, I've given up. I still think the season is over. But I do think the next 24-ish hours, Joe, we'll say about the next 30 by the time this comes out, could be very, very interesting. And the Reds may even, for some reason, wait to see what they do tonight. If the Reds pull off a win tonight, that may truly be enough for them to say, screw it, let's go do it and try to win. I think yesterday, if they won and they had won today, I really do believe the Reds would have been going for it. It is that close still, guys. We will not know, at least in my opinion, Joe, until the game starts tomorrow, what the Reds have truly done and where they're leaning. All I'm going to ask the front office to do, Joe, this is my words of wisdom for fans too. Ask them to do something this trade deadline. I don't care what it is, but do something. Try to get better one way or another. I don't care how you try to get better, other than, don't trade, players like Ellie De La Cruz or something like that, But, like, other than that, just try to find a way to get better. Get rid of bullpen pieces. If somebody will take Candy for an enormous deal, then trade him. You know what I mean? Like, those are the kinds of things I want to see the Reds do. And then if you can find somebody who can fit that right field position, if Luis Roberts is being offered up for pennies on the dollar for some reason, or there's just nobody else is reaching what the White Sox want, and the Reds have a prospect package that they can put together that's not going to be detrimental for the next 3 to 4 years, then do it. I say go for it and go get him. I don't care. Go find a way to get better, either for 2025 or for this year. But just find a way to get better. That's all it is, Joe. That's all I care about. What about you? Any wise words for the Reds and Reds fans?
Just trade everyone besides your 6 or so young core pieces. Get what you can in return. That's the name of the game here. If it is building for the future and getting prospects, that's fine. If it's getting young, controllable players who may help you win this year, but also have some control for the future, that is fine as well. For me, I don't know. I think this week, again, it's tough to say. It could be telling on what happens. Rob, if they go 4-2 like you're predicting, I mean, they're only 3 games under 500 then. It makes it a little bit more plausible that they go for it. So who knows what happens here. Obviously can't make any trades after that point, but 54, 57 would be pretty incredible. And you're playing 2 teams who are ahead of you on the standings. So this could, if anyone's holding out hope, I'm not gonna blame you for holding out hope. I'm not gonna say you were, a big dummy if they don't make the playoffs. But if you were, and hey, even Rob's predicting them to go 4-2 this week, they jump 2 teams that are right ahead of them. Then they're right behind the Pirates, Cardinals, and Diamondbacks, who are right outside the playoff race. And then kind of look at the schedule, and you're right. Like, after that, it's the Marlins. It's at the Marlins. There's 4 games. So if you're holding out hope, and you're like, hey, these, Joe specifically being a guy who's a big Debbie Downer, hey, more power to you if you want to cheer for the Reds. I'm not going to hold you back from that. In a week, in 10 days after we play the Marlins, if Rob's prediction this week is right, and then they win 3 out of 4 against the Marlins, they're right back in this thing.
Oh,
I can't see that happening. But, maybe if this week goes the way Rob predicts, I think Rob might hop back on the bandwagon. I don't know.
I will be on it. You know me. I can't say I'm not. I'm just trying to say it's over for my own mental at this point, because I've looked ahead at the schedule, and I will be honest, guys, I don't think they're realistically out of it officially. I don't think they will be until maybe the last 2 weeks, to be honest. I think this team is going to hover right around 500 this year, and that may be enough to get them into the playoffs the way the NL has been going. I will say the Mets and the Padres have been picking up steam. The Mets have already made a move. I expect the Padres will probably try to make a move. But again, I'll put it this way. If in the next 30 hours the Reds go out and find a good hitter, one good hitter, like a very good hitter, a guy who you could put somewhere between 2 and 5 in your order, who can bat above 260. Not a lot of those available, but they are. And I mean 260 afterwards. I know Luis Roberts has not been hitting well most of the season, but that dude can hit for sure. I keep bringing up those types of players, but if they can go out and find somebody like that, even Josh Bell just got put on waivers, Joe. You can get him for pennies on the dollar. I'm just saying, like, you can go get a decent hitter somewhere And if you do that, that will make this Reds team better, period. That will. And maybe you don't even have to give up very much to make it happen. But if they do that in the next 30 hours, then I think this Reds team can make a run. You don't even need a closer. I would love one. I would love a new bullpen piece, Joe. I really would. And Nick Krall has done a good job at finding those in the scrap piles or people who have been forgotten about for some reason, like Sam Moles. But like, if they can go out and get a freaking hitter, Joe, then I think this team can make a run. I'm just not anticipating them doing that, which is why I'm saying it's over. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us, guys. Appreciate you sticking around with us for the long haul on this one. We'll have to see what the Reds end up actually doing. We'll talk about it next week, unless if maybe I'll put out a TikTok or something if the Reds do something pretty crazy that's really hype, or the opposite that makes me extremely depressed. We'll have to see. But we'll wrap it up with that, guys. And we appreciate all of you who've been watching, especially on YouTube. Those of you who've been listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we appreciate it. Please give us that like and subscribe if you are so willing and able to do so. But with that, Joe, and for all of you, we'll catch you on the next one.